source?
When older people get together, they tend to have a conversation that I like to call an organ recital. Tell me about all the organs that are failing you. Not, but I think we all have those aches and pains, and I certainly hope that uh, yours can be taken care of. Sorry that you weren't feeling so great on a wonderful trip. As you can see on the screen, I think you all know my name is Debbie Long. I'm going ahead and record this session for those of our members who can't attend. Barbara Friedman, our president, can't attend today. She is actually honoring her um, recently deceased husband, Mitch, with family. And I do also want to acknowledge we have two new members. I want to acknowledge Liz Gotland for helping with membership because she's been sending out information to various Jewish organizations throughout North Carolina. So Talia Mazur, I hope she is going to be joining us. She lives in Chapel Hill, and James Hiddell from Apex. I'm hoping we're going to be able to have a more local meeting next month, but I'll just have to let you know as my travel plans become a little bit clearer. I think a lot of you are on our Facebook page, or you are connected in some other way to the Jewish genealogy world. So I'm sorry, I think I had a little bit of crosstalk. First of all, a thank you always to Mike, who helps me with all kinds of technology problems with editing. Same to Liz and Ava, both very helpful in getting all of those, I would say most of the word out in a way that is grammatical and properly formatted. As I was just about to say, if you are connected to the Jewish genealogy world, you probably know that Gary Mokotov passed away last week. If you don't know who Gary Mokotov is, you might want to Google him or go ahead and copy down that memory of Gary Mokotov, who was written by his longtime writing partner, Sally Amdor. If you've seen the word Mokotov, it's probably part of a hyphenation, the Mokotov Soundex system, which makes it so much easier to search for Jewish names. He was also the editor and publisher of Avotenu. And just if it wasn't for Gary, we probably wouldn't have a very rich computer database of information to use. He was an early adopter of computer technology for organizing the kind of work that we do. And sadly, another Jewish genealogist, a very well-known woman by the name of Shelley Talalay Dardashi, passed away in September, especially if you are interested in Sephardic Jewish genealogy. You might have heard of Shelley. She was also responsible for tracing the tribe, which is now on Facebook, and it had 36 and continues to have, as far as I know, 36,000 members in 101 countries. I thought it was important to share that information with you because we've lost some really important people in Jewish genealogy, including Stan Diamond late last year. Would any of you like to share a reminiscence or some other information about Shelley or about Gary? Let me go ahead and admit a few more people here to our room. I see Liz has just joined us, but she didn't hear me say thank you. So thank you again, Liz, for helping me with editing. And thank you also for being a contributory factor in adding two new members to our organization in the past month. And speaking of that, David can tell us a little bit about how our dues are doing. They're doing better because we have some new members and some last minute renewals. David, would you like to go ahead and take the mic and explain what we're looking at on the screen?
That's our financial statement as of today. Actually, is as of a few days ago when I published it. But we added 4 members. We had 2 people renew and 2 new people join. So we have a total of 60 members now. Our dues and donations kind of matched what our expenses were for the past 8 months. So we're running at a little bit of a loss for the year. We still have $1,800 in the checking account. And we're going to have a meeting next month to discuss whether we want to keep the dues the same going forward or have an increase in dues. We've been having more expenses in having to rent meeting rooms and paying for our speakers.
Yeah,
So we don't want to have that checking account balance get too low. But
I
we're
absolutely
okay
agree.
right now. Huh?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We are talking just kind of casually among ourselves after meetings about maybe raising the dues from $27, which they've been $27 since 2012, to maybe $36. But if you're interested in getting in on that conversation, as well as taking a look a year in advance. Where are we going? What kind of speakers are we going to hire? Are we going to maybe come up with some better venues? Please join the board. I've already asked a couple of people who aren't on the board to join in, because I value your input. The board meeting will be Sunday, October 5th at 1 p.m. And I will put this link in a number of emails out to the group. So I hope you'll join us. If you can't join us and you do have an issue or a concern or an idea for the board to consider for the next year, please let me know. I think you know where to reach me. Hi, Roz. Hi, Robert. Cheryl, nice to see
Good
you.
morning, good afternoon.
Okay, Liz joined us. And Liz, you missed my thank you to you again for helping us bring up our membership numbers. We have 2 new members. I think we could probably directly trace them back to you.
Oh,
Any
that's
questions?
good.
Yeah, it's very good. Any questions about David's report or this announcement about a board meeting? Feel free to put a question in chat. Okay. Well, speaking of things in advance, let's take a look at some dates I would like you to put on your calendar. Our next meeting is October 19th. It may be a hybrid meeting, or it may be just on Zoom. We're going to have Janet Silverman back, and she's going to talk about a topic that some of you might think is not specifically relevant to your research, because you'll notice we're referring to the Jewish communities of Galicia. But if you've ever been confused by your ancestors' vital records, especially if they say that there were some ancestors who were illegitimate, you might be very interested in finding out the reason why, and how Jewish communities had to maneuver around laws that forced them to describe their offspring as illegitimate. If you just joined us a few moments ago, you might have heard that one of our members had a very interesting discovery about a last name and how it was changed to a made-up name. So any questions at all about surnames, come in here. Janet Silverman, she's a wonderful speaker. We're going to have Todd Knowles from Family Search join us on November 16th. Now, we don't talk a lot about Family Search, but many of you know it is the database for the Mormon Church, now referred to as the Latter-day Saints, I think. And Todd, who is not Jewish, discovered in his research that he has some Jewish ancestry, and he got very interested in finding out about where are the Jewish databases within Family Search. So if you're confused, I know I am, about Family Search has changed the way it looks, please join us on Sunday, November 16th. And I'm especially excited about our December 7th meeting. We are doing our annual movie night. We're going to watch together Everything is Illuminated, which I imagine many of you have seen, but if you haven't seen it, it is really about heritage travel gone wrong. With a young man who, after his grandmother dies, decides he's going to find out what her story was. It is somewhat similar to A Real Pain, if you saw that film this year, but it is what I consider kind of a seminal film on Jewish heritage travel. You might recognize some of the actors, Elijah Wood, for example, Liev Schreiber, who's pretty much a Jewish celebrity on Facebook and other places, is the director. And it was written by the story was written by Jonathan Safran Foer, who's written a lot of novels and a couple of nonfiction as well. I am hoping to have a very special guest with us by Zoom. So please, and that's our Hanukkah party too. So please show up for that. And then already well into next year, 2026, can't believe I'm even saying this, we're going to have Marlis Humphrey, who is going to talk about the new era of Jewish genealogy, what's happening with the Jewish catalog or JCAT, AI, and just these incredible resources that are going to be coming online incrementally, but over the very near future. So that's as far as I have planned out. But again, if you've got some ideas or some resources or some questions that you'd like to have answered by an expert that we can reach, just let me know. Okay, we are recording this program. Just wanted to let you know that. Our speaker does not have a handout, but if you go to our website, you can always find our handouts once you've logged in under the heading of documents, and then go to meeting presentations. Just click on this little file folder and it will open up into all the meeting presentations we've ever had. And you can see there's quite a bit of other stuff there as well. Okay, let me let one more person in here. I'd like to pass the microphone over to Arlene now. Arlene, again, has recently rejoined us, and we chatted a bit by email about whether or not anybody else was going to the IAJGS conference, the International Association of Jewish Genealogy Societies, which was held in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Doesn't sound like a very interesting place, but you can see from Arlene's comment that it was her first one. She's very glad that she went. She went to a lot of workshops, informal breakfasts, and did a lot of networking. Arlene, tell us a little bit more.
Thanks so much. So yeah, so this was my first conference. It's I retired in February, and here you go. So now I have time. May not have all the money over time that it takes, but definitely have the time. So I have always wanted to go to this conference. Decided to just jump in. To me, it was fantastic. So it started off with the keynote speaker of CC Moore the first evening. There were, like you already shared, presentations, workshops, special interest luncheons, informal breakfast sessions that I took part in, vendors, exhibits, share fairs. I was able to get a couple of documents translated from Russian that I had been wanting to, that had been having trouble getting translated with tours. And I love the networking with all the other people. So for me, it was a great experience going to this conference. But I think for myself and others, that the icing on the cake was being across the street and one block down was the Genealogy Center at the Allen County Library, because that place was fantastic. So if you just want to share that first, yeah. So I just sent over Debbie a few pictures, or she picked out a few pictures of the ones that I sent over to her. So all week long, tours were provided by the genealogy staff at the Allen County Library to give you a layout of the library. And it took about 30 minutes, but this picture here is just showing you the entrance into the Genealogy Center, which is about 42,000 square feet of space. And then to the right side, what that is, and I wasn't able to have the benefit of it, but it's some scanners that allow you to scan in, and also they have a Vivid Pics memory station there that allows you to scan in photos, restore them, work on them, save them, and all at no cost to anyone at this center. So it's great. It's and at any point in time, and I'll say this throughout, is that the staff there is so willing to help. If you have trouble with any of the machines or finding, what you're looking for, or how to look things up, they're so willing to help you. So if you go on to the next slide, this is just a slide of one of the many signs that have been hung up welcoming, the conference attendees to the Genealogy Center. It was here, it was also at the conference center, and definitely welcome with open arms, and we're willing to do anything we needed, answer any questions that we had, and like I said, make themselves available. They did also extend the hours of the center for conference attendees so that we could make use of it after the day or before the day. of the presentations. So if you go on to the next slide. So this is just a multitude. So the top left is just a sign showing some of the areas, right, that are were available for the center, right? And so it's just one little piece of it. The next in the lower right is just a sign showing the Percy selection for Jewish research. And what that really was for is if you look at the picture on the right, that reference desk, they had put together prior to us arriving, the genealogy staff pulled together everything that they could find that had to do with Jewish records or Jewish type of records. They created a listing that filled 3 binders, alphabetized them, and left them on that reference desk so that we could use it for the Percy collection, just as a starting point. They wanted to make it easier for us to, see if there was anything that we wanted to look into. And so you just could go over to the binders and begin to look. If you had any trouble, again, they were willing to help. And then the photo, just go back one for 1 second. The one you just read, yeah. So the other thing I just want to point out is the photo on the right also shows an extremely small amount of the stacks and stacks and stacks of books that are available. There's currently about 1.2 million physical items currently available. They add about approximately 500 items a month. And I think in December of last year, they added another 1,000 items. So it includes everything from 55,000 compiled genealogies to US records, international records, books on states, synagogue records, newspapers, periodicals, and an extensive Jewish collection with Holocaust records, Yizkor books, synagogue histories, and so on and so forth. And then the next 2 slides is just going to show you the rows and rows. These are the microfilm viewers and then the reference desk as well for that area. And then the next slide will show you the rows and rows of the microfilm cabinets. There's I think it was about 660,000 items that they had, either a microfilm or fiche. And again, viewers willing to help if you're not sure how to look, what to look for, but again, just another opportunity. And then the picture on the left is just right outside the Genealogy Center. It's just a hallway because, again, the Genealogy Center is 42,000 square foot of space within the Allen County Library. I would say that there's really too much to mention, that, to mention everything that's there. But in my opinion, it was the center itself, but which made it great. But to me, what just put it over the top was the staff. The staff was amazing. They were so willing to help. They came and were always available, even in the conference center. They were giving presentations, or one of the managers was there on site if we had any questions about anything at any point in time. And I will say that if you found information, they seemed just as happy, or I don't know, just as happy as you were if you found something. One evening I was there and I was researching, and someone next to me had gone to, I think, the city of Chicago looking for a certificate, and they couldn't find it. And the staff was helping her there, and they located it here. At Fort Wayne, and she was in tears because she had been looking for it for the longest time. And the staff was telling each other, and they were so happy, that we were successful. So they were, it was great. It was my first conference. Conference was wonderful. Genealogy Center was amazing. So I would say that if you ever make it to that area, definitely do a stop in, because, if I'm ever there again, I definitely will go back.
How much time do you think somebody should prepare to spend at this library if they're doing research there?
Well, it depends upon, if you have something specific. I went over a couple of evenings because I did make use of all the presentations, or the time for the presentation. So I went over a couple of evenings for like an hour or so. but I stayed an extra day, and I probably would have stayed a couple of days there. You know, even without the conference, just looking because they have that much information. In fact, once I was home, I was like, oh, I should have looked at that also. So
where is next year's conference?
so I was looking forward to it. I was already, you know, my husband is not the researcher in our family, so I was already texting him saying, "Oh, I'm definitely going next year. This is great." Next year will be a virtual conference. They had been hoping to have it in Denver, but the locations just weren't accommodating to what was needed, and they wanted too much guarantee up front. So next year, you know, there are people that were very pleased that it'll be virtual. There's people like myself who will miss the interaction and networking. They're looking to make the year after that in person again, but next year will be a virtual conference, is what was announced at the conference.
Ava has a question.
Just real quick.
Sure.
Did you take all those pictures yourself?
Yes.
How did you get all those pictures with no people in them?
I don't know. Maybe it was the time. I don't know. I just would walk around.
Was it really crowded or not at all crowded when you were there?
Well, if you went over to somewhere like they had these stacks of books, they have about 55,000 books of just family genealogies, and there's tables upon tables there. And there were a lot of people there or by the PCs themselves, but I don't know. I just would walk along. The hallways weren't really very crowded. The one that's on the left there, the one right outside the genealogy center. But I don't know. I think I took a lot of them on Friday morning because I hit the genealogy center like as soon as it opened Friday morning.
Arlene, thank you so much for that all too quick report. I've been to 3 of these conferences, and everyone has given me incredible amounts of information, but I really have library envy now.
It was great. It was great.
If you ever go to Salt Lake City and go to the Family Search Library, the mothership, you'll want to stay. You know, you'll wish that they had a hotel on the top floor. You'll want to stay for days and days and days, and this place looks the same. So thank you very much for that report, Arlene.
You're welcome. The only thing that they did not accommodate, I will tell you, is that I tried to talk them into letting me put an air mattress in the center and sleep there, but you know, they said they've been asked that before. So
any other questions of Arlene?
So thank you again for letting me share.
Thank you for sharing with us. And speaking of sharing, it's time to introduce the person we've all been waiting to hear, and that is Dr. Eliyana Adler, who's going to be talking to us about Yizkor Booker or Yizkor books, memorial books. If you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at these incredible books, they are, I think, best known for documenting the history of Jewish communities that were destroyed in the Holocaust. I know that Eliyana is going to give us a little bit of history about how these books came to be. One of the challenges, of course, is that they were written in Yiddish or Hebrew or both. Sadly, both of those languages have been lost to me, except for the cuss words in Yiddish. But even if you can't read the text, there's a lot of translation work going on, and they often include necrologies, which are very easy to read. Those are the lists of the people who have died. And they often, as Eliyana will share with you, have maps and photographs and illustrations. Eliyana's already on the line with us, but I just wanted to share some of her incredible academic prowess. She said she's very busy right now because the school term has started. She's a student and a teacher of East European Jewish history with particular focus on Poland and Russia, the USSR. She has written a number of books. Her first book was called In Her Hands, The Education of Jewish Girls in Tsarist Russia. And she has also written a second book that she shared the title with us of Survival on the Margins, Polish Jewish Refugees in the Wartime Soviet Union. And she tells me she's working on another project having to do with post-Holocaust Jewish memorial books. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing so that Eliyana, can put her screen up. She's asked that you hold your questions until the end. You can certainly put them in chat. I'll just share them with Eliyana as she is finishing up. So welcome, Dr. Adler.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, introducing me. I'm glad to be here and talking about one of my favorite topics. I could go on and on, but I do have an organized presentation, and then I'm happy to speak more about Yizkor books. My first encounter with a Yizkor book was when I spent a year after I graduated from college working in Judaica cataloging at an academic library. So I was not I didn't have a degree in library science. I was sort of an entry level, and my job it was called copy cataloging. I had to just take the really easy stuff, just fill in the author, the title, the language in which a particular book was written, that sort of thing. And then my supervisor would do the more complicated thing. But one day, a book came across my desk that was impossible to catalog because it had not one name, but three different names, one in Hebrew, one in Yiddish, and one in English. So how was I to know what the title was? It had not one author, but a whole page of authors, a whole authorial committee. I couldn't even figure out what language to put as primary because it depended which side you opened the book on. So I was utterly flummoxed and also enchanted. And I spent the rest of the afternoon just paging through this book, trying to figure out what it was. And at the time, I was applying to graduate school that year, and I wanted to study East European Jewish history. It didn't even occur to me that I could study these books. As Debbie pointed out, I had a number of other projects. I've been working in this field for decades already, but just recently, within the past few years, I realized that I could actually write about Yizkor books. I've used them throughout the years. I've used them in my research and also in the classroom. I often bring them in to show students, to have students interact with them. But just in the past few years, I realized that I could actually contribute by writing about these books, what they are, where they came from. So that's what I've been working on. I've been doing research and some writing over the past few years, and I will share some of it, a tiny portion of it today. And I know that Jewish genealogists work a lot with Yizkor books already. So I hope that what I'm telling you is somewhat new, or at least gives you a new perspective, that even if you've worked with these books before, this is sort of an opportunity to step back and think about where they come from and why, as you continue to use them. And for those of you who haven't used them yet, it's certainly a plug for doing so. Okay, so to begin with, what are Yizkor books? I've done a lot of thinking about this over the past few years, trying to come up with a definition. The word in Yiddish, Yizkor book, is usually translated in English as memorial book. Sometimes they're called in Hebrew Sifrei Zikaron. All of those words, the English, the Yiddish, or the Hebrew, they could mean many things. That is, say, a family album could be a memorial book or a yearbook. Even a memoir might be a type of memorial book. So the term itself doesn't tell us everything we need to know. And for that, we turn to some definitional categories that are, at least for me, have proven useful. So I think of these books as communal, collaborative, comprehensive, and commemorative. And I will tell you what I mean by that. First of all, they are communal in that they are written about single individual Jewish communities. Now, of course, there are some Yizkor books that are actually about, say, a school or writers or those who worked in the theater. But the vast majority of them are about the Jewish communities in one town or one region of Europe. And so, in that way, they are, on the whole, communally focused. Secondly, they're collaborative. The vast majority of these books are written by committee, and they read like it, by the way. There's a lot of repetition, there's a lot of disagreement within them. That's part of the charm of the books, and part of the reason also that historians have often been dismissive of them, but we can talk more about that. But that is to say, they're collaborative. Most of them were produced by Landsmannschaften, and that is hometown associations. And this is a photograph of the hometown association in Buenos Aires of the Piotrków Trybunalski, Jews from Piotrków. So letters went out to all of these Landsmannschaften, and people were invited to send in recollections, photographs, documents, anything they had from the old country, and then committees gathered together all of that collaborative work and edited it and created volumes out of it. So this makes them very unique as books. Most of the books that we read and look at are not collaborative to this same level. They're really a grassroots project. Additionally, they're comprehensive. And by that, I mean that, and again, we'll speak about this a little bit more as we go forward, but we might imagine that a book about the destruction of a Jewish community would be about the destruction of that community, would be all about the Holocaust. But in fact, they're about so much more, and usually much more about the pre-war life, and a little bit about post-war also. So in that sense, they are comprehensive. And of course, they're commemorative. And that is the most important. That's right there in the title. These books are a form of saying Yizkor. They're a form of memorial for the people and the whole culture that was lost in each of these communities. So for now, those are the categories I'm working with when I think about what fits and what doesn't fit. And by the way, there's a lot of books that are kind of on the edge that seem like Yizkor Bicher, but aren't quite, or in some ways are and in other ways aren't. And that means that everyone who studies them, and I'm not the only one, has to come up with their own definitional categories to try and make sense and figure out what fits, how we want to define these books. Okay, I want to talk now a little bit about their purpose. As I said, it is primarily commemorative, but what does that mean? How do you make a commemorative book? What does it look like? What does it contain? And for that, we'll look at a few different examples of all of them in the introduction. The single editor or the editorial committee tries to explain what it is that they want to do. So just to give you a couple examples here from Sefer Yizkor L'Kedoshe Pshayich, which is Piedzisz in Polish, this memorial book will immortalize the memories of our relatives and friends, the Jews of Pshayich. It will also serve as a substitute grave. Whenever we pick up the book, we will feel we are standing next to their grave, because even that, the murderers denied them. So that's a very common theme, that substitute grave, that this book is filling a hole that they can't, the survivors, go to a physical grave, both because there isn't one, but also because they're not staying there. By the time they're writing these books, they're far away from these towns. So where do they go? And the book is saying it's serving that purpose everywhere. And another way of saying that from Ostrov Mazowiecki is soon after the war in 1945, I was consumed by the idea of producing a book to personify a memorial to the Jews of our ravaged hometown, whom the Nazis destroyed, a real monument to the unnamed dead and wind-blown ashes, an eternal light for their pure souls. And if the monument or memorial is the number one metaphor that they use, the number two is the eternal light. Those are the ways, the sort of Jewish language that the editors use to try and explain what it is they're trying to do here. And finally, I want to look at the third one because it's more polemical. It says there can be no better or more enduring monument than this Yizkor book. It is a gravestone of holy letters that can never be erased. Gravestones of wood and stone are not immortal. Wood rots and burns. Stones can be dug up and broken off. A gravestone of letters, however, lives forever. So in this case, the author, and this is Terhichin, is saying that this isn't sort of a because we couldn't do any better, because we couldn't make a grave, but actually we are doing better. This is even better than a grave. This book provides more to its readers. So that gives a sense of how the authors and editors try and explain what they think they're doing. And they needed to do that, by the way, because you are probably aware that Jewish communities can be a little bit suspicious about change. So the authors and editors of these books had to convince readers that what they were doing was worthwhile. And even if it was innovative, it was also entirely acceptable and it fit with Jewish themes and Jewish traditions. So that tells us something about purpose. Moving now on to discussing something about content of the books. This is just one example from the book about Grodno. And I've highlighted the section. Oh, it goes a little bit higher. It goes 3 lines higher. It should actually go up to that title there. That is the part of the book that deals with the Holocaust. So just visually, this gives you a sense of, each book is different. They're not all the same, but in one book, proportionally, and it's not so far from others, the whole first part of this book is history and traditions and youth groups and political parties and educational institutions and folklore, just all about the Jewish community in Grodno before the war. And only at the very end do we actually get to the Holocaust. And then after that, the final line is about the post-war. So, as I say, each book is different, but this just gives us a sense about how much is in this book. They're also often just huge. Most of the books are made up of words. There's just a lot of words from all different people with memories of these places, but there are also visual aspects to the books. And these include, on the top right here, historical documents. Sometimes by chance, one person had held on to a historical document, or more likely, the committees were able to write to Poland or wherever it is they were representing and write to archives there after the war and have historical documents sent either from the single Jewish archive that survived, the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, the Zich, or from just local archives in their town, have material sent to them to put in their book. So there's historical documents. There's also artwork. And you can see at the bottom right, a very lovely sketch of Zamość. And if anyone has been there, it's a beautiful early modern town. It really looks like that. It still does. And so just some memories of what that town looked like from someone from there. Um, Memory maps are quite common in the books. These are usually made, as in the case of this one, which is from Jedwabne. They're not made in a scientific manner. They're mostly not made by engineers or map makers. There isn't necessarily a scale. Um, these are not so much for capturing the exact relationship of all of these sites, but for memory. That is, people who are already from there, they can recognize the buildings, the trees, the sites, and in memory, they can walk through the town. And people found that very meaningful to do. And of course, photographs. The major visual aspects of these books are photographs. These were photographs that people sent before the war to family members, um, or that came from books, or that people saved somehow and got back after the war. Um, a lot of them are in this particular book that I've given some examples of, they have a whole section of photos. They're all at the end, and it's like a photo album. In other books, they're interspersed all through the book. You just have to look. You're never going to know when you're going to find a photo. And sometimes the photos are related to the text that you're reading, and sometimes they're not. It's just a photo that somebody wanted to put in. So that's something about the visual aspects of these books. Numbers. So my focus is on books in pre-war in Poland, that is the pre-war borders of Poland. So that includes part of Lithuania, a small part of Lithuania, and larger parts of contemporary Ukraine and Belarus. This is a map created by Adam Kapczowski for a book he wrote in Polish about Yizkor books. Tremendous piece of work here in which he has mapped out every single town in Poland for which there is a Yizkor book. And this visually, I just want you, I realize it's too small to see all the towns, but this just gives you a sense of the level of coverage. Poland has more Yizkor books and earlier Yizkor books than any other country. It's just for a whole series of reasons, some of which we don't even understand. It really became this genre associated with Polish Jewish communities in particular. That doesn't mean that there aren't Yizkor books in other communities and other parts of Europe. And in fact, there are more and more. There are still some coming out. But the ones coming out today, of course, are different in that they're not created by communities of survivors, but of second, third generation. What's even harder to see on this map is that there's actually colors, so that black is one book, green is two books, and the red dot is more than three. So for example, toward the bottom of the map, Krakow has more than three. That makes sense. That was a huge historic Jewish community that we would all expect to be well represented. But up on the top left, Sierps, which was a town that had 600 Jewish families before the war, also has three or more memorial books. So it's not necessarily the size or importance of a community that explains how many books were written about it. There's all sorts of reasons that go into that. One of the reasons that once people started making these books, everyone else wanted to make them too. It became sort of a proper and expected way of memorializing, commemorating Polish Jewish communities, and somewhat embarrassing for those who hadn't done so. And just to give you a sense of that, this is a book review of Sefer Kutna, which came out in 1968. And so in the Arbeiterwort, one of the Yiddish papers, not the only one, in Paris in 1968, we can read, "The Book of Kutno and Surroundings, published in both our languages, Yiddish and Hebrew, is without a doubt among the best books in our memorial and Holocaust literature. Let us hope that the Landsmannschaften that have not memorialized their hometowns will take an example from the community of Kutno and its area," which is just to show how it was becoming normative and expected. And this reviewer feels a need to sort of poke the other communities and remind them that this is a responsibility, something they should be doing. I'm now going to turn to talking about the evolution of these books. So this has been sort of an introduction to the genre and some of the main factors about it. And now I want to talk about the evolution of these books over the whole post-war period. So already almost immediately after the war ended, we begin to see what I've called here some post-war pamphlets. Some of these, like the one at the top there, Podolia in Umkum, came out in DP camps. So the Landsmannschaft, the people from Podlyasha, not Podolia, excuse me, from Podlyasha, got together in the DP camp and under the leadership of Feigenbaum, who's the editor there. This was not the only book he edited. They pulled together whatever they had. But of course, in a DP camp, they had very little. So they had names. They had a handful of photographs. They had a handful of memories. But this is a book that's really mostly about the destruction, and it's very thin. And similar things were going on elsewhere. On the right, we can see Churban Vilna, which is one of many, many books about Vilna, many, many Yizkor books, but this is one of the earliest ones by Shmerka Kasserchinsky, he was touring around Europe after the war. Some of you may know he was sort of an ethnomusicologist as well as a poet. He was collecting songs, Holocaust songs. So he was traveling to all the DP camps as well as the major cities where post-war Jews gathered and writing down their songs. And while he was there, he was also collecting material, which he was sending ahead to New York. And in 1947, he published Churban Vilna, The Destruction of Vilna, in New York. And he already had collected some artwork, a few photographs, a few documents. But again, it's very thin and it's almost entirely about the Holocaust. And then the last example here, just to give a sense of sort of all of the different places where this was happening, is a more unusual Andenkbuch von Novi Dvor, was published in Los Angeles in 1948. So a Landsmannschaft there gathered materials from that they had collected on their own and from some survivors who came and put out, again, this tiny pamphlet. So almost all of these, this kind of first generation of Yizkor Bicher are entirely about the Holocaust and have one editor and author. They're somewhat collaborative in that other people sent in maybe a picture or a sketch, but they're much more limited in terms of how much other people are contributing. They're not nearly as collaborative. So that's sort of the first ingredient that goes toward the creation of later books. The other ingredient I want to look at, in addition to the post-war pamphlets, is Landsmannschaft literature. Because already before the war, Landsmannschaften outside of Europe, that is, hometown communities who were looking back toward Europe but settled elsewhere, already had a practice of collecting materials about their towns for souvenir journals or Yovel books, essentially yearly books that would be put out sometimes every year at their banquet or sometimes just on anniversary years, every 10 years, every 5 years. they would put out these books about their hometowns, about what drew them all together. And these were collaborative books. They were also thin. These were also pamphlets where they would put in some artwork, some photographs, and a lot of memories of home. People would write about their childhood. Often these were people who had left maybe as teenagers and gone to the United States, Australia, Argentina, someplace else. So they would recollect what it was like. What were the holidays like when they grew up? Those sort of things. So this Landsmannschaft literature is another ingredient that goes toward the eventual emergence of full-scale Yizkor books. And from my perspective, that happens around 1950. But throughout the 40s, there's these kind of pieces coming out. But by 1950, we begin to see some thick, full-on books. And I just included this photograph from a recent article that my university did just to show you the size of these books. If you haven't seen them physically, if you're only using them online, just, there's me and there's the books. You just see they are enormous volumes. And that begins that the physical expansion of individual books, as well as the expansion of the genre to include many more places, really begins in the 1950s. And first, it is largely diasporic all over the place. People are putting out these books, but some of the centers are New York and Buenos Aires, who are putting out books mostly in Yiddish. By the 1960s, the centers of publication move to Israel. The first decade of Israel's existence, there wasn't a lot of time or money or paper. Literally, there wasn't paper to put out books. But by the 1960s, Israel is in better shape, and the Landsmannschaften there feel that they should be the center, that they are the sort of replacement communities for what was lost. And they begin to put out the majority of Yizkor books in the 1960s and the 1970s. And I didn't mention, if we just go back to this, there are over 500 just representing Polish communities. And depending on how you count, say 1,000 or so overall of these books. And they are, in the 1960s and 70s, they're coming out in these large forms, mostly in Israel. By the 1980s, they begin to drop off, as do Landsmannschaften. That is, the generation of survivors and war refugees who really brought life to those organizations are themselves getting elderly, are dying, and their children are not interested on the whole. There are some exceptions. There are some Landsmannschaften that still go on, but there are a minority. Mostly their children are busy living in the new country, in the new world, and don't want to be part of this old world kind of organization. And so the books slow down. They aren't coming out in as large numbers. The organizations begin to disappear. And that could have been the end. Just that would be all we would say. And still it would be enough. I would still think that this is an absolutely worthwhile and important topic, even if that had been the end, if people had put these books away and never looked at them again. But in fact, that isn't what happened. They have had an afterlife. In the 1990s, Jewish genealogists began to discover Yizkor books, and genealogy really took off. And there were a number of frustrations getting a hold of the books and also understanding the books. And so some organizations came to do what they could to kind of fill in and help people. So the New York Public Library, which has one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the largest collections of Yizkor books, was getting so many requests for copies. Everyone was writing to them from all over the world and asked, can you copy pages 613 through 620 of this book? And it was a lot of wear and tear on the books. And it also was not the best use of the librarian's time. And they decided to try and figure out how to make them more available so that you didn't have to come to New York, or you didn't have to wait around till they could get an intern who had time to do photocopying. And they began a project of scanning together with using the technology of the National Yiddish Book Center, which had already been involved in scanning. So together, the New York Public Library and the Yiddish Book Center began to scan all of the Yizkor books in their collection for which they could get permission. So that isn't all the Yizkor books that exist, but it's really an impressive number, over 700. So that was the first step toward making these accessible. But of course, the books are primarily in Hebrew. Many of them also have a shorter Yiddish section. Some of them have a tiny little English section, but that isn't all that people want or need who are doing research. So again, maybe some of you were part of this, but in online forums already in the late 90s, Jewish genealogists were sharing sort of pirated translations of these books. My uncle says this is what this means on these pages, and sharing this with one another. And finally, Jewish Gen was able to overcome some legal and both legal and technical issues to be able to start posting legally and with permission translations. And that has been just a huge boon for genealogical researchers, but for many other researchers as well, including historians, that these translations have been appearing online. The translations are often crowdsourced, often not professional. They make mistakes, but they are a tremendous gift to researchers everywhere. And then, of course, Jewish Gen has also made available printed copies of many of the translations, and these can be purchased, and in many ways can serve some of the same just at the survivor generation. These books were front and center in their homes. They were objects, they were sacred objects, as well as sources of information. And to some degree, I see that happening with some of the physical volumes that are now available in English, that people are also very proud of them and very attached to them and want to show them and want to often cover them with marks and post-it notes, and they're treated with a lot of respect. So this is what I have referred to as the afterlife, and it goes on. And in many ways, we still don't even know where it will go exactly. One of the places it's going, and we can talk about this in the Q&A if we want to, but I didn't include a whole slide about it here, is that once this information becomes available online in English, that means anyone can read it. And some Polish non-Jews have been quite fascinated by this information, and there are now about a dozen Polish translations of Yizkor books. So a whole nother aspect of their afterlife. Okay. A little bit about the books and what we can get from them. I think oftentimes, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the books are used chiefly amongst genealogical researchers for the names. That is particularly the necrologies. It's a short, fast, easy way. All of those, not all of them, many of them have been translated. You can look and see if there's any relevant names. I would say that, from my understanding, that's sort of the number one way they're used. And number two would be to say to look at also translated tables of contents to see if there's any familiar names that come up there. But what I really want to encourage all of you to think about is all the other ways that these books can be used to better understand the towns and communities and lifestyles of our ancestors. And just some of what is in these books is local Holocaust history. All of us can find books about Holocaust history generally, but to know precisely what happened in a given town and the exact dates on which it happened is not going to be in even the best textbooks. But it's in the Yizkor books with a great deal of local knowledge, including by the way that they name names. They say who the perpetrators are, if they're local people. They can't tell the Germans apart. They can't even tell the SS from the Wehrmacht. But local people they know very well, and they say who they are. Testimonies, firsthand accounts. There's also often at the end of the books information about the Landsmannschaften, photographs of how they looked in 1966 when the book was put together, and often little reports from the Landsmannschaften all over the world who contributed to the book. They sort of say in a paragraph or two what they've been doing. So again, it gives you a sense of the ways in which these communities continued to function even after their town was gone and some of the people who had leadership roles there. A tremendous amount of information about pre-war Jewish life, a good deal of literature of varied quality, by the way. Sometimes there might be from a certain town a famous individual who is from there, and they'll put in some of that person's writings, but often not important literary figures, but just people who send in a poem or a short story about what they remember. Some of the folklore in these books is unparalleled. There are words in Yiddish that were only known in one town. And if somebody hadn't written that down, no one would know and have any idea about the meaning of that word and its context. There's also songs. I didn't even put that in here. Some of the books have local songs as part of their folklore sections. The maps can be somewhat difficult to use. They're often handwritten, and as I say, there is no scale. But on the other hand, if you're trying to understand the town and you have some idea of where your family's house, apartment, field was located, it can really give you a sense of how dense was the community, how integrated was the community with the non-Jews who lived in the area, how large was the community. The photographs also are invaluable, and as I say, sometimes they're spread throughout. You cannot always find them in one section, and sometimes they have names associated with them. That is, someone might have sent in, say, this is my Beis Yaakov school class from 1936, and here's the names of all the girls I remember in that class. But sometimes they just send in the picture, but you still might be able to actually recognize individuals. The geography of the town in relation to other towns is also interesting. Oftentimes, if we're studying just one area, we're just looking at that, but just to see how close and how much some of these, particularly the smaller communities, were part of larger communities in many ways. The village Jews maybe stayed for Shabbat in their village, but for holidays, they went to a larger town that was nearby, and all of that geography is part of their history. The linguistics within these books is very worthwhile, and of course, just all the memories that are preserved. So that's really my suggestion to you, and what I want to leave you with is to look deeper into these books. Now, having said that, of course, the books are objects of memory. They are deeply nostalgic, sometimes even surprisingly so. Again, we might imagine that there would be a great deal of pain expressed in these books, and there is in the Holocaust section. But in the pre-war section, often people are describing an idyllic childhood, the sort of prelapsarian past before everything went wrong. So that is meaningful and useful, but it's also represents a post-Holocaust view, a looking back on people and places and institutions that are no more. And we do have to keep that in mind when we use these as sources for understanding that there's going to be exaggeration, there's going to be sometimes forgetting the conflicts or trying to minimize them. Now, that is not always true, by the way. Some of these books actually contain quite a lot of sense of conflict from the pre-war era, but some of them have covered it up. Also, the place of publication is going to affect the book. As I said, the majority of the books that came out in the 1960s and 70s in Israel have, not surprisingly, a very Zionist framing. That is, the survival of the Landsmannschaft and of the handful of people who made it through the war and came to Israel as seen as a redemption. Not everyone, and certainly not some of the books published elsewhere, would present it that same way. And so again, we have to read these with somewhat of a critical eye, but there is so much there, so much of great meaning. And I hope that this is a useful introduction to thinking about them. You might already be very familiar with these sources if you're already working in them, but I've just put up here the New York Public Library, the National Yiddish Book Center, and Jewish Gen, which are the main places to seek online access to these books. I guess my last point I would make is, of course, it's always easier to use online sources. We don't have to go anywhere and they're right there. But the experience of using the physical copies of the books can be very meaningful and sort of seeing how they're put together. And so I would agree with the speaker earlier, who I also was at that conference, and the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana has a really nice collection, surprisingly, of Yizkor books. And you can walk right there and grab them off the shelves, unlike at the New York Public Library or at YIVO or at many of the larger, certainly at the Holocaust Museum or at Yad Vashem, you have to ask permission to use them. There you can just walk right over and grab them. So I hope you all have a chance to do so. And now I'm interested in hearing if you have questions.
Okay, I see that Rosalind Darling has her hand up first. Take it away, Rosalind.
It's not really a question, it's just a comment. I just wanted to echo what the speaker said about the value of, I mean, I had always known that my ancestors died in the Holocaust and, that they were taken to Auschwitz, but I really didn't know any of the details. And in the Yizkor book on their community of Kush.
So, sorry, Rosalind, you cut out. Could you, I think you might have hit something that muted yourself. There you go.
I didn't touch anything, but anyway, I don't know when that happens, so I'll go back a little bit. I just wanted to say, it's not a question, I just want to echo what the speaker said about the value of the descriptions in these books. In the Yizkor book from Kushnitsa, the town that my ancestors were from in what is now Ukraine, there were vivid descriptions of exactly what happened when the Jews were rounded up. They were taken to this factory in a nearby city, and there were descriptions of, for example, my great-grandfather. The Jews were told that they had to shave off their beards. And I mean, this image has always stayed with me ever since I saw it in this book. Apparently, my great-grandfather literally plucked the hairs out of his face with his hands as a kind of protest, I guess, about the shaving their beards. And, apparently he was very bloody. And, it was graphically described in this Yizkor book. And, that was something that I certainly didn't know before I saw it there. I'm not sure I want to know it, but this is the kind of thing you can find in these books. It really puts some, adds so much to just your knowledge that something happened. You can actually read detailed descriptions of some of that.
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely agree. And I think that for a long time, just to add on here, historians didn't think these books were very reliable. And for numbers, they're actually not. Like if they say 10,000 people did this, well, for sure not. But in other ways, they really are. And now I believe that people are really realizing that to understand that the Holocaust is different in every town because of local commanders, because of the environment, because of the interactions with local people. And we're just now beginning to understand that as we take these sources more seriously.
Eliana, before we take Liz's question, I just wanted to mention another place where you can get your hands on Yizkor books, eBay.
Mm.
If you want to own one, go to eBay, type in either Yizkor book or the name of the Yizkor book or the name of your town, and you can set an alert so that if any of these books become available, you can get there first. And we also have a comment in chat from Cheryl and with a link. Cheryl, you and I have an interest in the same town, Chichanov. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but that was one of the towns that Jewish Gen took the Yizkor book, had it all translated into English, and you can buy it in hardback on Amazon and a couple of other sources. And yeah, I'm one of those people that put the sticky notes in there so that when I'm gone, my daughter knows these are the pages I was interested in. Liz, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks for your talk. It was really interesting. I have ancestors who came from Lomza, Poland, and there are several Yizkor books that are on the New York Public Library website, but they're all in Hebrew. And so I went to Jewish Gen, and there is the index of one of these books that was translated, and nothing else, but the index is in English. And so I wrote to the contact person and I said, "Are there any plans for full translation?" She just writes back, "Not that I know of." And there are no projects showing on Jewish Gen in the Yizkor books section. So my question is, this is not the most soulful approach, but would it be possible for me to use something like Transcribus to translate at least a part? Yeah, that's it right there. At least a part of the book.
Yeah,
Or is that going to be just too inaccurate, do you think?
the various sort of AI and other types of online translation are um, a, are okay for Hebrew, absolutely abysmal for Yiddish. They just don't have enough practice with Yiddish. You know, you have to have a certain amount of text. So I would say, I mean, my opinion would be they're great for scanning, just to see what you have. And then I would highly encourage you to pay a professional once you figure out, oh, this article is really the most interesting, or I think that's a family name over here, to pay a professional to do a decent translation of the section that you need.
Okay.
And then to share it, you know, to start.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I do
would.
really appreciate that it's the way that people, because there might be other people who've done a little piece on their own, but don't want to be in charge. Because of course, once you write to Jewish Gen, they say, "Oh, don't you want to be in charge of all the Womsha
Yeah.
books?"
No.
And maybe you don't.
I've actually done that.
Okay.
My mother's sister lived in a town called Zhezhko, not too far from Krakow, and no one had translated the Zhezhko Briggle book. And So what I decided to do was to allow myself to become the person who is in charge of collecting donations. I wrote to everybody on the Jewish Gen Family Finder who was searching for information about this town. And lo and behold, a couple people gave $1,000 each. They got to pick which part of the Yizkor book was important to them to get it translated. I was sharing with Eliyana that professional translation is very expensive. Jewish Gen does it right. They don't just, get a half-witted translation. They get people who have been vetted in translation. It costs somewhere around $35 to $50 a page. It's very expensive, and that's why the donations are important. But if you could find some other people who are interested in Lumza by going to Jewish Gen Family Finder and say, this is, here's the Yizkor book, here's the table of contents. Is there a part you're interested in? Would you be willing to give $18, $180, whatever the case may be? You might be able to get part of that book together. Just a
Okay.
thought, but it does
Yeah.
involve more heavy lifting on your part.
I know there is a Lamsa Facebook group, so
That's
I could
another
ask
great place.
there too.
Yeah.
Milwaukee Lamsa. Mhm.
Rosalind,
Thank
you have
you.
a follow-up question too?
It was just if anyone's interested locally in getting some of these, getting your hands on these books, the way I got this particular Yizkor book that I mentioned is I just went to the library at UNC Chapel Hill and ordered it through interlibrary loan, because some of these are available in libraries in other parts of the country. This particular book was in the Yale University Library, and they sent it here, and I was able to go pick it up at the UNC library and use it. So
Yeah, anyone who has borrowing privileges at an academic library, these are easier to get. And sometimes it's shocking where they end up. And my understanding is that that comes from donations, that a local person happened to have the book from their town, and when they passed away, their kids just gave it to whatever library was there. So sometimes, universities that with very small Jewish studies, with no Jewish faculty presence, really might have a handful of books that were just given to them. But that works well if you have that level of access. And I just wanted to say on the Womja point that that's one of the places where sometimes the fact that there's multiple books is sort of just because, well, they made one in the 50s, and then by the 70s there was more to say. They'd found more material. In the case of Womja, it's because, and this is not the only town, because they were in Broges, because the people were upset about the first book and didn't think they did a good job. And so the second people came along and did a different book sort of in opposition. So sometimes we can see that in the multiplicity of books also.
Oh, interesting that you'd even know about that. I mean, you're an expert, but that particular town and their disputes. Okay. Oh, thanks.
And Roz, do you know how, or rather, Liz, do you know where to find the Jewish Gen Family Finder?
Oh, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that you did, because again, you can go to Jewish Gen. Let me just go ahead and pop this up for you here. Okay, I just Googled Jewish Gen Family Finder, and it'll give you a direct link. You can type in the name of your town and see how many people are looking for family from that town. Ava, you have your hand up as well. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Probably my fault. Still muted. Okay, I can see Lee getting up to go to help you. He's coming in from the other room. And I've got a few questions of my own, so I'm just holding back until Ava can ask hers. I was going to add, in looking at a Yizkor book for the town of Dobermill, I found my brother-in-law's grandparents and what happened to them and how they were at the train station. And there were these also lovely stories about members of his family, and they gave him some insight about the character of his family members, that one, that his grandmother was sweet and kind and gave bread. And, as Eliyana was saying, it's not just about the Holocaust. It was about people in the town and what they were like. And for some of us, children of survivors or ancestors of survivors, we don't know anything about what people were like. We know their name, maybe we know their date, maybe we know where they died, but what were they like as people? And those Yizkor books are just delightful, Ashley, in that regard. Go ahead, Ava.
No, I just quickly, Eliana mentioned sharing. And I'm just curious, are there any kind of copyright restrictions or anything you need to worry about? I mean, can you just if you took a chapter of this book and translated it, could you just put it on your webpage so that people can get to it?
So this is precisely what the New York Public Library spent quite a bit of time and money trying to figure out. And they actually wrote to every single Landsmannschaft, most of them in Israel, that had published one of these books. And their lawyer told them that you had to have 3 letters unreturned before you could say it's out of copyright.
Oh.
So, but they did that in, say, 1999. At this point, the chances that there's somebody still sitting at the desk waiting for letters to come is even smaller. It's minute. So, pretty much we can just use the material from the Yizkor books. And that's what Jewish Gen is doing when they're publishing these translations. They don't, I mean, it's also a nonprofit, but they're not getting anyone's permission to do so.
Interesting. Can you share, Eliana, I got the sense that the first Yizkor books came out post-war, obviously, 1950, the last one, 1980 or so. Is that about the right range of publication dates?
So this is where it gets sticky. I mean, generally speaking, yes, but it depends what you count. Those dates hold pretty true for Polish books, but Hungarian books, for example, have a different periodization. They start later, and they really have their largest period of coming out in the 80s rather than in the 70s, and they tend to be in Hungarian, whereas none of the Polish books are in Polish. No one even dreamt for a minute about putting out one of these books, none of the Polish Jews, in Polish. So the Hungarian Jewish community is different because of their Holocaust experience, because of their post-war experience. And as a result of that, there also just aren't as many, but they have a different timeline. So I'm really focusing on the Polish ones, and there are outliers in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I mean, one of the outliers is many people say that there was a book published literally called Yizkor Book Lodge in 1943. So many people say that's the first Yizkor book. Personally, I would say it can't be, because in 1943, the Lodz ghetto still existed. Lodz as a community could have still survived in situ had the war ended earlier. But it is certainly a related type of book, even if it's not exactly a Yizkor book.
Mm-hmm. Well, today you can kind of imagine that somebody would get an idea. Let's do Yizkor books and crowdsource it and, have the internet. But who is the person who really came up with this idea and got this fantastic project on its way? Is there any one book, any one person that you could say they were the first and the idea just caught fire?
Yeah, this is something I've been trying to figure out, and I would say yes and no. Not one person, for sure, not one person. But
Mhm.
I do think that there are some precedents that aren't quite Yizkor books, but are certainly related, such as pogrom books. There's a series of pogrom books that begin to come out, say, starting around 1918, and all the way up. The last one is in 1937. In 1937, the community of Felshton in New York the Felsteners, put out a pogrom book. The pogrom already happened, back a decade and a half ago, but they get around to putting out their pogrom book, and it looks an awful lot like a Yizkor book. It's got beautiful art in it by the children's illustrator Nota Kozlowski. It's got a lot of stories about life before the war. It's the thickest and most elaborate of the pogrom books. The ones that came before it tend to be a little thinner and really much more focused on the actual pogrom. So it becomes clear that this genre is kind of in development even before the war, and that then people are able to pick it up right after the war and continue bringing it forward. But it's iterative. Everyone is adding more to it. So, the early DP ones are a form of Yizkor book, but they don't have that much about the pre-war. But by 1950, there are already books that are coming out that combine those together, and not just one. So they're all learning from each other, but not in a sort of direct one-on-one way, I would say.
And it sounds like they were self-published, and I assume financed by the members of the Landsmannschaften. That's how they
Yeah.
got them out there.
Yeah, and they were basically sort of published by subscription. That is, the Landsmannschaften members were getting, you have to get your $8 in by this date if you want your copy. We think the Yizkor book's going to be done by this date. Every meeting that they were getting those notices, that sort of thing. And of course, they printed a few extra for people who didn't get it in on time. And also they donated to some of the libraries nearby. But with some exception, there are a few that are actually rather nicely put together, but most of them are really thin paper, poor quality of photographs. People didn't have a lot of money to put in, but they had a lot of love and time to put in.
You mentioned your area of focus has been Poland, and that Hungary's Yizkor books are different. Our organization's president is from Belarus. Could you speak for a moment about the Yizkor book effort in that country?
So the parts of Belarus that were part of Poland between the wars are fairly well represented. The parts that were already in the Soviet Union, basically overall, Soviet territory did not have a lot of Yizkor books put out. Some have come out in Russian after the fall of the Soviet Union, but those are in many ways different. I would put those in sort of, again, sort of an adjacent category. They're not quite the same, but they're related. So it depends where in Belarus. The Belarusian community, Belarusian population overall was fairly sparse. It just wasn't the most settled of parts of Eastern Europe. So the Jewish communities were also somewhat small, except in, large cities. But so some of the Western cities do have books and towns, but most of the Eastern ones do not.
I wanted to share with everyone, if you haven't looked at a Yizkor book necrology, here is an example of one. I wish more of these books, Eliyana, had a very comprehensive indice. Drives me crazy that they don't, because you may have a family member who doesn't appear on a necrology like this, but their name is in the book, or they wrote it. You have to look at the table of contents, and maybe you'll get lucky that a family name is in the table of contents, but they might appear elsewhere. And the only way to go through it is to go page by page, and hopefully you can read the language. But here's a good example of a necrology from, I think this is the book from Dobromil.
So that's also a good example of the ways in which this sort of next generation afterlife is one of the arguments I want to make in my book is that in many ways this whole Jewish gen development is changing the books. Like the books are themselves continuing to develop So that necrology that you showed, for example, the original doesn't look like that. The original just has names in a list. And that one, they've really made a chart and tried to make it much more user-friendly. So that's an example of the ways in which the next generation is advancing them, changing them for the needs of the present, which I think is also an interesting factor.
Interesting. And again, just to share another screenshot here, or something from eBay. I know owning something like this, you said, becomes kind of a prize in a family home. So just go to eBay or go to Google and type in eBay, Yizkor books for sale, or even put in the name of your town, and you can see that there are quite a number of them here, and also gives us a little bit of an idea of what Eliyana was saying about the condition of the books and what they look like. There was no standard format. Oh, here's one I've been looking for. There you go. Okay, Mike, you've been notably silent. I don't know if you're still there, but you've been tracing your family in Ukraine for a long time. Did you have any particular questions or maybe observations about Yizkor books from Ukraine?
No, I've got the books from both sides of the family, and actually there's not much in there because most of my family got out. But no questions.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay, Robert.
First, thank you for a fascinating presentation. I really appreciated it. I wanted to get a Yizkor book, and I sent off, this is some years ago, I sent off a check to Jewish Gen, and back came a beautiful copy of a book, and I thought, wow, that was easy. And I tried to get one subsequently in later years for a nearby town to this first area, and it seems to be impossible. And why, and Jewish Gen doesn't seem to sell them anymore, or has a change taken place? I'm puzzled by what's going on. Your
So
suggestion about eBay, however, is remarkable. I will take care of that. But
yeah,
uh,
Jewish Gen hasn't translated all of them. So some of them just aren't translated yet. They're just not there. And many of them are in process. Jewish Gen is putting out something, it's remarkable, like 3 to 4 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of action going on, but not every town has yet been translated or published. And then sometimes the publications that did come out, they run out of, but mostly they will get around to reprinting them. And the other option is the Yiddish Book Center will print out just a physical copy of their scan of the book. So it doesn't come out as glossy as the Jewish Gen one, but if they have it, they'll just print to order for you.
is this one in Massachusetts? This
Yes.
the Yiddish
We
Book
should
Center?
probably also mention that rare booksellers, and David Wyman comes to mind. David Wyman is a seller of Judaica and old Jewish books. So just Google David Wyman Yizkor or something like that, and you'll find his site too. That might help you find what you're looking for, Robert.
But that might be the original one. I mean, it
Yeah,
depends
the
if you want
original,
the
right.
translation or the original, or both.
Yeah, I love the idea that the book center, the one in Massachusetts, will make a scan for you, and they're not really expensive.
No, they're not.
No, they're under $30. So you won't have the original, but you'll have a copy, and that could be helpful too, to have it in a scan form. To do what Liz was talking about, for example, going to Transcribus or one of these other places might be very, very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Who else has a question? Well, I don't see any questions. Let me just double check here, make sure I have looked at everybody. Eliyana, could you just speak very briefly before you go about the project that's underway that you said once you've gotten your students all set, you have another idea for work on Yizkor books.
Well, I'm just trying to write this book. I've been gathering materials for a few years. I looked at Landsmannschaften files in Tel Aviv and New York and Buenos Aires and Johannesburg. And I've looked at many of the books, and done a lot of interviewing, and I now would like to write it up and put it in order. And I'm trying to write a history of the genre and explain the emergence and development of these books up to the present. And that's the part that's different for me is I'm trained as a historian, so normally I'm not taking it up to the present. But because these books are still very much part of the conversation, I've been interviewing people involved with Jewish Gen, as well as people using the books in Poland, for trying to understand what's happening now.
Well, I really envy somebody who lives her life in her mind and has all this time to devote to these fascinating subjects. I hope you'll let us know when your book is out. And I want to thank you on behalf of everybody who is here and the people who are going to be watching this video for sharing your comprehensive knowledge of these very valuable resources for Jewish genealogists. Can we all give, as Lee and others are doing?
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that your weather stays seasonable in Binghamton and that your students appreciate how wonderful it is to have a teacher like you.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting
Okay,
you.
and I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you, Eliyana.
Bye.
And for those of you who perhaps would like to stick around in kibitz or maybe share some of the things that you've learned or some other observations about Yizkor books, this would be a great time.
I have a comment. Is my sound still on?
Yes, it is, Liz. We can hear you.
Okay, well, as you may or may not know, I scanned all 25 volumes of a journal called Landsman, and it's devoted to the Suwalki and Lamsa provinces. And it's like 5,000 pages in total. And it's like a big Yizkor book, really, because it has all of the elements that she described, description of the traditions and, the culture, and also the dark times, and lists of births, marriages, deaths. It just strikes me that this is really a monumental achievement. It's like one big Yizkor book, and I may not even need the actual Yizkor book for Lamsa.
And you and I have talked about finding a home for this incredible document. Have you gotten anywhere with that?
Well, you said you mentioned me, and people can write to me if they want volumes. It's at the website.
No. What's going to happen with these scans that you've done? Where are they going to go?
Oh, well, they're just in my cloud account right now.
Yeah.
So I can email issues to people.
Okay.
But that's the only plan I have. Now, this Marlene Silverman has the copyright.
Right.
I did notice that our speaker today said that if you send 3 letters and they go unanswered, that means they've given up the copyright. I don't know.
That was true on the Yizkor books, and I was paying attention to that as well, because I remember we had this conversation that nobody wants to say it's okay for Liz to put these up on any website. There's some anxiety about copyright, but I wonder if that rule applies here too. 3 unreturned inquiries. I've never
Oh.
heard of that before.
Oh, well, okay.
How do you prove they're not returned?
Letters that are returned to sender, maybe? I guess it would
I'm,
have to be letters.
let me follow up with our speaker today
Okay,
and see if she can give me some citation.
okay.
And we'll go from there, because it'd be a shame for that just to reside on your computer and not be
Yeah,
a benefit to anybody else, right?
yeah, okay.
All right. So we'll follow up on that.
All right.
Any other stories or observations or research that you're working on that you'd like to share? I'll share one with you if you don't have one. You can tell sometimes how desperate I am for uh, entertainment. I was working on my ex-husband's side of the tree. There were, and we didn't share any children, so there's really no ancestral connection, but there were a couple of funny stories that I had heard, and I decided I'm going to follow up. I might not share this information with him. He might not be interested, but he had always said that his family's name was changed at Ellis Island. We all know that that's a myth. He said that his father's grandfather's real name was Sam Rosen, or rather, that was the name that he got in the United States, but his real name was Leisure Glazier, Larry the glassmaker. And somehow it was changed at Ellis Island. So it was just too funny to pass up.
Leisure.
And the story from the family was that Leisure came over on the boat. He didn't speak English. He was nervous about meeting the immigration officials at Ellis Island, and talked to a fellow he didn't know on the ship as well. And the guy said, "Don't worry, I speak English. Whatever I say to the officials, you say after." So the first guy gets up to the immigration official and says, "What's your name?" "Sam Rosen." "What is my ex-husband's grandfather?" "No, my name is Sam Rosen." And that's presumably how the family went from Leisure Glazier to Sam Rosen. Not true. His name really was Samuel Rosen, I found out. The other story that I heard was a little bit more wrapped in mystery. My ex-husband said that his grandfather on the other side died in 1918 from a mysterious illness that nobody talked about ever. Well, what do you think of when you think of 1918 and people dying?
The Spanish flu.
Yeah, but there was nothing mysterious about it, or nothing, no particular shame associated with it. So I thought there's something not right here. So I applied to the Illinois Department of Health. It took 6 months before I could get this guy's death certificate. And it was the stamp that made it official was partially obscuring the cause of death. Can't even remember the name of the cause of death right now, but I looked it up. And it turned out that he had, I imagine it was some kind of a virus, but he had terrible sores in his mouth, causing him not to be able to eat or drink. So essentially, he died of malnutrition and starvation. I don't know what was so shameful about it, but I did ask a doctor friend of mine about how this would be treated today. And she said, well, it was probably something like herpes, but not herpes, something viral. And certainly we would have been able to give the man some IV,
Maybe.
right? That would keep him alive until these things healed. So I was wondering, should I share this information with my ex-husband? This always causes me a great ethical dilemma. He didn't ask me to do this research. It's nothing that he needs to know. So I decided I'll just keep this to myself for the time being. But I had to know.
Could have been hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Maybe. It looked like the word Purunga, and I did find a word that was very, very similar to that. So I answered the question to satisfy myself, but I'm probably the only one who cares. And that happens sometimes, doesn't it? Mike,
What did it sound like?
um,
What
I'll
did
show you. I'll show you the. I'd
Okay.
be able to share the death certificate if you give me a minute. I was going to ask Mike. I know Mike, you've been traveling all over, and perhaps at Christmas and Hanukkah, you're going to give us a little bit of a travel log. But was there anything of interest in your last round of travels that has to do with Jewish genealogy, perhaps?
I'm trying to remember. Actually, my last trip was Iceland and Greenland. And I don't remember explicitly seeing anything, although didn't we have a discussion about whether there was actually a synagogue somewhere in Greenland?
Right. We did have a discussion about that, I think.
And I think you said there was, but
There was one and it didn't, I looked it up and it didn't exist anymore, or there wasn't much going on there, I think.
I
All
did have a smoked meat sandwich and a Montreal bagel in Montreal.
That sounds good.
It was.
All right, Liz, just for you, because you asked,
Okay.
let me pull up this death certificate.
Yes, I have to know.
I don't know if you can see it yet.
Yeah, but can you expand it to make
Yeah, there it
more
is.
readable?
I did look it up at the time. PEM something HIGUA.
It's PEMPHIGUA.
There you go.
Yeah,
How do
I
you
can
pronounce
say
that, Ava?
Penfigua?
Yeah. And if you go on ChatGPT, you can, see what it is. And then there are these secondary causes, which there's toxemia. And this one, I looked that up too. It looks like inanation, which means he couldn't eat, he couldn't drink.
Oh, this is it. This is it. Pemphigus
Okay.
is a group of autoimmune skin disorders characterized by the formation of fluid-filled blisters on the skin and mucous membranes.
Yeah.
That's the inside of your mouth. The
Yeah.
Pemphigus vulgaris, the most common type, causing blisters on the skin, mouth, and throat.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it's autoimmune, which is
It's
interesting.
autoimmune.
Yeah.
That's not viral.
Well, and as I look at that whole family tree of my ex-husband's, and it dead ends with him. There were a lot of things like multiple sclerosis in the family.
Okay, that's autoimmune.
Yeah. And
There you go.
yeah, I think I got lucky. Getting divorced. Okay, David.
Interesting discussion, and then thinking back, I found a first cousin of my father's. She would be my first cousin once removed, living in Vinnytsia in Ukraine. And I corresponded with her for 14 years. And I've got a notebook that thick with her letters. And she wrote to me in Russian, but I helped a lot of Russian people here. So I got everything translated immediately, and I write back to her and get my English letters translated to Russian. But I've got to go back through all those letters and see if I have enough material to put together a Yizkor book for the people, and because she was born in the same town as my father, and then moved to Vinnytsia. So I've got an interesting project ahead of me.
Yeah, you do.
Mhm.
There are a lot of communities that have their own Facebook pages, even contemporary communities. I'm on one for my hometown of Skokie. I think it's called Growing Up in Skokie. And when you look at some of the stories, because somebody will start a conversation about, what was your favorite restaurant, or who was your favorite high school teacher? And all of these little stories are delightful, but they're on Facebook. They're not put together in some kind of anthology or collection. But it would take somebody like you, David, an organizer, to get something together. It's a big project. When we talked to Marlis Humphreys in January, she's kind of a global thinker. She comes up with these incredibly big projects. We might want to ask her about how do we just take a piece of something like this, just like Liz is dealing with the Savaki Lumza material and what to do with it. And David, you've got this idea, where do you go? What's the next step? There are a lot of big projects out there to get us even better organized as hobbyists. Hobbyist is the wrong word. To manage our obsession. Well, I'm hoping that we'll see a lot of each other not January, but rather in October, that we'll see you for Janet Silverman's talk. I want to thank you for coming today. And for those of you who celebrate the high holidays, I hope this is a great opportunity for you to be with your family, ask those questions, share the stories. I know whenever I come over, people tend to run away from me because they know what's coming next, but I hope that your family is a little bit more generous in their response than mine. Okay, be well, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Ava, I'll be in touch with the link and all that good stuff.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.